All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Today we've got Wheel of Time, Path of Daggers. We start with Elayne, and then we get into Rand and the Seanchan. But as we're going forward, I keep wanting to do the comments first. Two
Yep.
two things. It kind of gets us on a roll. Also, they're usually about the last episode, so it kind of serves as a recap
Mm,
going forward. So first comment, late. That's Heath's fault, not
yep.
mine. Uh, becomes a tyrant. You mean book 3? Talking about Egwene. Okay, so she was showing the traits of a tyrant in book 3, but she
Yeah.
becomes the tyrant now because now she has the power to go with the traits.
Mm,
Before she didn't have the power. Power is in the metaphorical term, not the power is in used in
yeah.
the books. So yes, she was developing into the person who would do this, and this is why in the reread it was so obvious to us. In the first read, it's not as obvious that, oh my gosh, she is this way all the time.
Mm,
Let's see, the Aes Sedai and the three oaths. Egwene should have stuck with her original thought. She has the example of the wise ones who had no oaths yet operated for the common good and behaved honorably. So this one I made a note on because I read
yeah.
through these before. uh I think this I think they're both good examples of how you create a gameable system for the bad guys.
Mm,
The reason the Black Aja was able to be subversive for so long is because they were allowed to lie. They found a way around the three oaths by unoathing them and then swearing their own oaths. The wise ones keep getting caught blind because they expect everybody to tell the truth because that's their culture. Well, the bad people in that culture are lying.
mm,
Even
yeah.
someone who was semi halfway seemingly a decent person in most interactions and actually tried to follow Jay Ito, but was a dark friend, Melindra, remember her?
Mm,
She followed Jay Ito except when she was subverting her real nature.
yeah. Well, and my point was that I think Sawan makes a compelling case there, at least from the point of view of the Aes Sedai. And Egwene is becoming more and more Aes Sedai, but she can still bridge those two worlds. So she does still want to bring all channelers together, but I think she understands from Sawan's kind of rant there that, yeah, we can all be together in a coalition, in an alliance, but we're not the same people. And what makes a defining characteristic of the wise ones is Jiatou. That's their thing, and we see what happens with the dingleberries from Karheen when you try and copy it, but it's more of a facsimile,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not you. And then same thing with the Aes Sedai. It's, however flawed, the oaths are a 3,000-year tradition. And one of those chapter names was stronger than written law, because sometimes when you have a custom, especially a 3 millennia custom, it doesn't have to be written down. It's ingrained in people's bones, practically.
But I was thinking about, okay, so for a commune, for a cohesiveness of a unit, these things on the surface are better. The three O's, we know we're all telling the truth, blah blah blah. The
Mm-hmm.
JATO, we all know we have an honor code and we're not going to lie to each other and scheme against each other. So those work as a commune, as a cohesive unit, but they're also extremely easy to game because the obvious way to game it is to just pretend.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like when you're fighting true evil, the best system is probably the one with the least restriction, because now you all, everybody has a skeptical part of their being. So I don't take anything for granted. So if someone says something that doesn't sound right, the skeptic is more likely to come out in me. Whereas if someone says something and I expect that they have to tell the truth, that little bit of skeptic goes away because I have that inner dialogue that says, well, they said it has to be true, which we see many times in the books. Well, they said it outright, so it has to be true, and we know from our perspective that the other person is a dark friend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So something I just realized I hadn't really thought of before, but you actually see that in the Black Tower as we get more interactions with the Black Tower later, but that's because they don't have a tradition. All they have is the very basic, civilizational uh social system that people have been using. So there's no structure. They're having to figure it out as they go along and work it,
Well, and
work the system as best they can.
not only that, it's actually the most honest area because yes, you don't know he's a dark friend, but you know Tame is a tyrant. Rand recruits him specifically because he's a tyrant. He at this point in the books, that's what he thinks is needed, that
Yep.
iron fist of the law to come down on any dissent. And so it's a very open and honest bad guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, he basically says that when he recruits Taim, is that, you know, yeah, I know you're a son of a bitch, but now you're my son of a bitch, and you do what I say. You 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 fire where I point.
Yeah, one of the best compliments I ever got was, Sam, you're an asshole, but you're our asshole. And that there is something to that. And actually the biggest surprise I got in the books from Taim is when he mercifully kills the ones that are going crazy, and he doesn't just whack their head off or something. It's when he's actually that's like, wow, you did something nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's kind of creepy about it, but he's not wrong that, much more merciful than what the Aes Sedai do from their perspective for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you basically you're putting somebody in a situation where they for the rest of their life want to be dead, or you're just basically putting them to sleep. Now, I do think if we were to add motives to it, and who knows how much Jordan thought into this part of it, but I almost would, if I was to add something to it, if I was Taim, I would do that to kind of actually curry favor with Rand.
Mm.
Do it in that way, even though I'd rather just blow them up or something, use them for target practice.
Yeah.
Do this merciful thing so I can throw it in there. So Rand it does the job he wanted me to do in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
He will trust me more. All right, what's the next comment? The problem with Egwene is she had power but no wisdom that encourages despotism. Yes, this is, I think, one of the major themes. Rand's climb to power actually is a little bit more gradual, and nothing is given to him.
Mm.
Moiraine pushes him in the right directions with things, but nothing. When you actually look at his seizing of power, there was always an obstacle in the way. Even becoming the Karn, the obstacle wasn't necessarily being selected to go to Rhydian, but you still had to pass the pillars, and Asmodean had to be defeated for that whole thing to go down the way it did. When he took the Stone of Tyr, he scaled a sheer wall to get to a place to get in, and fought his way down to almost die to one Forsaken, who Moiraine takes out, and then take out another Forsaken, who was the most powerful Forsaken. So, yeah, okay, so he's the king of Tyr now. But look what he had to do to get there. And also just think of the 3-month journey he did on foot with everybody trying to kill him along the way, and for some reason knowing where he is. He had to go through that whole ordeal to come out at the end.
That's a good point and something I hadn't thought of before. And remember, we said a couple times way back at the beginning.
And Egwene just got spanked by some wise ones.
No.
Yeah.
It's worse than that though, because we said this would come up again and again in the Great Hunt. The one time where she really wasn't handed a position of respect and some degree of authority was with the Seanchan. It was the polar opposite end of the spectrum of, literal slavery and torture. So that's going to shape her and how she reacts with power to protect. And because she's still a decent person, it's not just protect herself and her position, but also protect the people she views as allies or underlings or she's responsible for.
So let me propose this then. What might have been a little bit better of a story arc from a engagement standpoint and a less annoying for her character standpoint would have been more of a Spartacus ending, where she rises up through the domain and somehow finds a way to free the slaves and becoming the leader of the freed slaves in the process. and then marching to power from then on, instead of just being rescued and then becoming a student again, and then all of a sudden being in power.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because she does go kind of right back to where she left off, and there's no
Right
there's a
back to where she left off with a chip on her shoulder is what it is.
exactly
Yeah.
there's a personal and psychological overcoming of that hardship, but Egwene needs more than just the personal because she's in a position of power. She has to deal with all these people. You know, put a pin in that for spoilers later, because there is a moment of that, but it's a moment, and that's, I think, the problem you're pointing out.
Yeah.
Is it's
Now,
not a theme that carries over the whole way through.
there is something to be said about perspective too. And this is one that a lot of people thankfully don't have, but I do. And we talked about this in the last episode. When people say, oh, Trump is a tyrant, or oh, this person is a tyrant, oh, they're fascist, blah, 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 blah. I always look at them sideways because of the house I grew up in. I know what exactly a tyrant looks like. They take many forms, but they all look the same. And they all kind of have the same patterns to them. She knows what a tyrant looks like under the Seanchan. Now they go in and they're actually good to businesses and stuff when they take over a place. But if you are a channeler, you're not part of that mix. You are subjugated, and
Because you're a threat to the authority.
Yeah, and if you have any patterns of free life in your mind, they are very quickly attempted to be removed from your mind. And so it's she understands what it is to be oppressed under a tyrant, but then she kind of loses that insight. We needed some kind of continuation of that insight, but she kind of loses it along the way and just becomes the thing that she was.
Yeah.
I mean, because what is the first thing she does to get loyalty is have these people under the 3 oaths swear fealty. They are slaves because
essentially,
unless they're a dark friend, they're slaves. Shiriam is the only one that's not a slave. There's actually a comment where she's the only happy one.
That's a good point.
And that was my first thought, is she's the only one not bound to that oath.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
I should have brought that up last time because it was one of my big thoughts that had come out.
Yeah, because I pointed out she seems happier now that she's not fighting against. I pointed that out, but it's specifically Sheriam that feels happier. The other ones that were part of Sheriam's little cabal there, they become more content as they start to recognize and acknowledge Egwene's competence, but they're not happy.
They're post hoc rationalizing it in their minds. You know,
well, I don't think it's just post hoc. I mean, Egwene does demonstrate competence when she's supposed to be this ditzy girl that can be controlled.
But there is some coping going along there. You know, otherwise it would have been just one or two having.
Okay, but speaking of coping, let's get ourselves canceled again because we haven't done that lately. It just occurred to me as you were talking there about how Egwene comes to power contrasted with Rand. But isn't that the way it should be? Because Egwene, as you said, Rand has to fight all the way to gain his position and hold it and earn respect and deference. And Egwene is just kind of given it. Well, she's not exactly given it, but she doesn't have to fight because she's a woman. And that's the way women work. She has to learn how to work within the coalition. She has to learn how to balance and manipulate the egos and desires of the different female personalities around her. So no, she doesn't have to. She is, from the beginning, she has to learn how to be manipulative, but then isn't that how women are?
You're correct on the different fighting style, but you're not correct on the gaining of power, because she didn't do that to gain power. She gained power and then is doing it to maintain power.
Yes, that is true, because it's so much. Yes, she wasn't wholly in a position of power when she was an apprentice of the Wise One, but we still see, not just from her, but then from Avienda and others, even being an apprentice of a Wise One carries a lot of weight. And on top of that, she was thought to be a full Aes Sedai, so she had a lot of respect and authority that she otherwise wouldn't have had.
Now on your arc you're trying to bring is, if they had brought her back because you're an initiate of the tower and she listened, did everything like it happened, but she got back and just showed competency after competency after competency. And then the little tower mini hall that wasn't the real hall said, hey, check out what this girl's doing. This is our person. And Swan the whole time was helping her under the surface, like, hey, they're out for you at the beginning. And we could have had the same story arc, just the raising happened a little later. Where she could have come in and just shown that she has grown beyond all the other accepted in the area and most of the Aes Sedai. It's less sudden. It's less justifying her being there. It's more her earning being there.
Well, I slightly disagree because I mean the whole point, the whole
It was a surprise. It was
that
yeah.
she wasn't there. So one, she was powerful, and raw power goes a long way with the Aes Sedai. And two, she wasn't part of any faction, even White Tower versus Saladar.
Yeah, but I think you still could have
She
achieved
wasn't
that
there.
with a
So
little.
but what I think you're talking about should have happened afterwards, because I think where the kind of the break is right then after she's raised, when she has that kind of confrontation with Sawan, and she's all imperious and authoritarian, when she should have had to work a little bit more, because there is a moment there where you're from Egwene's perspective and she's looking authoritative, but internally she's concerned because she's gambling here and she knows it. And I thought that could have been drawn out a little bit more rather than Sawan just immediately flipping to, okay, I'm your right hand. I'm the one working behind the scenes to make sure what you want is what happens.
Okay, so let's kind of cap that right there, because we're going to get into some similar talk with Elayne going forward, because she's also rising to power. And see, this actually feeds into what we were talking about, because Elayne, the whole point of her storyline from here on out isn't that just because your daughter heir, you're handed the throne. Everybody thought, oh, when she, Rand is thinking when she's back, she gets the throne.
Yep.
That's just the way it is. But she actually knows that she has to go through this whole process to earn the throne.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that with Egwene. We're going to get that, even though it is a slightly annoying storyline.
That's a good point.
We at least get that where she is earning the throne. But let's get to the last comment is absolutely correct. And I think we could do a better job of making this point go forward. My main objection to Egwene is that she knew better, but chose to put the Aes Sedai in opposition of Rand. Well, that's why I put the Evolution of Desire up, because we're going to get to some here with Avienda's conversation with Elayne, cross-sex mind reading. She is putting intentions in Rand's head that aren't there. And this is something that's very common with females when they're dealing with males. Men are more straightforward and focused, and that's not a sexist comment. There are advantages and disadvantages to that. Women put intentions on a lot of things that aren't there, which has advantages and disadvantages. It's better at protecting yourself in the long run because you anticipate danger better, which women are better at. Men are better at being focused on the goal, which accomplishes eliminating the danger better than the anticipation. So they just have disclaimer, overlapping bell curves. They have different advantages and disadvantages, and men tend to be more on the focused and less anxiety ridden route, and women tend to be on the more predicted and anxiety ridden route. And that's
this is where I agree, but then disagree back with the premise, because to Scott's point, no, she didn't know better, because she was doing this with Rand in book 1.
And she was doing it a lot in book 6 when she's talking with in book 5 too, when she's talking with Moiraine, and she's aghast that Moiraine made her oath. She started to do that more and more in those 2 books, where at the end she's in her own mind trying to protect the wise ones from Rand, and trying to protect the Aes Sedai from Rand. And that's what she's doing going forward in the books. She thinks she's protecting the tower from Rand, and she's completely convinced as this. She should know better. You're right. The word should is there, but if shoulds and coulds were, governing
exactly.
our lives,
But
everything would
but
be hunky dory.
she doesn't seem to have known better back in book one before all of this good and terrible stuff started to happen. This is just who she is and who her and Rand are together. Their chemistry, their interaction together from the very beginning.
There's an old saying: behind every great man, there's a great woman. When a man says it, he means I had all this support along the way. When a woman says it, she means she knew better and guided him along the way. That's that's an original statement. If you want to quote that, you can clip that one. I said, don't clip me on the last episode. You can clip that one. I think that was profound.
Well, let's get to it here and get to the point where you were. Let's just segue right to that. That's so this is chapter 20 into Andor, and let's get to what you were talking about with the ascribing of motive with Avienda and Elayne talking.
Well, let's set the stage. So last time we left off with them,
Yes,
we had
kaboom.
the nuclear bomb. Nuclear bomb, and we're Lan and Nynaeve are bandaging them up and getting them back to camp, which I had forgotten they had gotten damaged in the process as well. But yay, Elayne didn't kill everybody, just a bunch of Seanchan.
Yep.
There was something in the beginning that I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. So we'll just move on. I think it had to do with Nynaeve and Elise.
It's more of kind of what we talked about last time with the way Nynaeve behaves around her and her kind of imposter syndrome.
No, there was some. Yeah, no, it's not imposter syndrome. It's the whole reputation race. So Nynaeve, we talked about being pretty masculine in a lot of her behaviors because she was raised by a man, even though she's a woman. And what we know from reputation a perspective, the person who blows up first is the loser. It's like in sales. When the silent time comes, the first person to talk loses, right? And she is so volatile, but she understands that the way Elise is playing the game, if I blow up at her, I lose all position, period. So she's letting it build up inside her instead of actually just becoming more like Elise and playing the same game. But she's also young. She's like 21 years old here, 22 years old. And Elise is what, in her 40s, approximately 50s? Because she wasn't very
looks like that, but
she wasn't very strong in the power, though. She wasn't strong in the power,
true.
so she's going to be closer looking to her real age.
That's true. All right. So where do you want to go to then? Because the first good chunk there is just them traveling along through on their way into Andor and then to Camelin, and then you get kind of a montage scene of Elise dealing with things and it annoying Nynaeve.
Yeah, and then we're getting into the Nynaeve and Lan relationship. The dynamics there going forward, because I like that we get that from Elayne's perspective, because later on when we have the same thing from Rand's perspective, he's just like, okay. But Elayne is like, oh my gosh, this is so awkward.
That's a good point. I had thought of that.
And she actually is the one who describes it for us, the sea folk traditions, because we talked about it already, but she's actually describing it for us in this chapter. Okay, this is the dynamic, because they know they're going to have all these rank issues. And what's up, Ben? All right, he just got back from his swim meet. So, but they actually, this is where she actually details out, because of the way the sea folk ranking system works, someone may be in charge over the other. So the way the marriage works is, if you're in charge in the ranking system, you're subjective in private life. And it could end up going back and forth. We were wrong. When we first described it, we said the woman was outwardly the captain outside, but it actually is a back and forth thing. And whoever has that power dynamic gives up the power dynamic in the other one, which in Nynaeve and Land's case, because he's a warder, he will never have the outward upper hand. So it actually changes it, and I think you need to adjust for that. But I think he seems to be pretty happy in his role, though. But he's also 20 years used to being a warder.
Exactly. Yeah.
And frankly, if you gave me the choice of being subjective in public and champion in the bedroom, I think I'd pick that one too.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I kind of a semi-random thought here. So the next kind of montage we get after the Elise and Nynaeve stuff is Elayne going through the different small villages, people not knowing who she is, and so she's chatting with the common folk. And it's interesting that she gets a lot of the same reaction, just in a different context, but she doesn't get the level of annoyance and frustration and counter reaction that she has had when she has had this kind of level of disrespect and questioning her authority with the other Aes Sedai and with the other women here. So she seems to have a lot more respect for the Andoran commoners than she does her fellow women, her fellow Aes Sedai and wise ones and everything.
Well, and in this sequence, I took a little bit of just the main characters. We talk about the Aes Sedai all the time, but it's all the characters. They're a little bit of hubris because she does dismiss a lot of things that we know to be true, because that can't be true. Rand's king of Ilion, yeah, no, that's not true.
On page 450 in the paperback, you get another example of the kind of the contrast with her, I guess, her ego, that in much the same way we were talking about Egwene for so long, of she knows better. Well, not yes, but she should know better. So this is where she's sitting in the inn. So the start of this is sitting on the edge of her bed in an inn called the Wild Boar. She examined this Terran girl. She's messing around with the Terran Griel, which she on one level knows is dangerous, but on the other level is not. I know more about any Terran Griel than anyone living probably since, the breaking. I've literally made them, so I know what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden, the heat of the rod made her think of fire. ... Blinking, she opened her eyes, sat up in the bed. Sunlight streamed in at the window. She was in her shift, and Nynaeve, fully dressed, stood frowning down at her. Aviendha and Bridget were watching from beside the door. What happened? Elayne demanded, and Nynaeve shook her head grimly. You don't want to know.
Yeah, and I like the way they did it where no one would tell her, but everybody's snickering, because Jordan lets you. It's the rats and the figs all over again,
yeah.
right? Because now was she in the middle of the bar flicking her bean or something? It is. She got all hot, right? Fire, hot. She got all a little bit hot and bothered, and decided. So something like that. You're like, you're putting the worst thing it could. Or was she just flirting with every guy in the inn? Or is something along those, running around naked? We don't know.
Yeah. Um, and then we get to the point where the weather shifts here for them, which we've already saw that it shifted previously with Perrin. We already saw that it was starting to shift. I can't remember if we did get one with Rand. Yeah, we did get one with Rand, because it was way back at the beginning, because it was starting to storm there when he was in Ilion. Let's see now. So what was your next?
Well, there's a good little moment where they're all arguing about whose fault it was that they don't have cold weather clothes.
Yeah.
I know whose fault it was, and it's the only person that wasn't in the argument. The Windfinders. They should have known the weather would overcompensate.
Yeah.
If they were the experts, they should have known it would have overcompensated, which would have allowed the people who lived in that area to say, "Oh my goodness, it's going to get really cold."
Yeah. Well, and they kind of say that with the analogy of, we just turned the tiller on a ship the size of the world. You
Mm-hmm.
know, okay, yeah, so it's going to take a while to turn, but boy, howdy when it turns,
Mm-hmm.
because it is something that massive. Um, all
What
right,
she said, by the way.
exactly. Uh, any other thoughts before the end of that chapter?
Well, I was talking about the cross-sex mind reading. Randall Thor tricked me, Eviana muttered suddenly. I
Oh,
tried to
yeah, yeah,
buy
yeah.
my toe from him. I know that is the least honorable way, but I could see no other. And he stood me on my head. Why is it? When you reason things out logically, a man always does something completely illogical and gains an upper hand.
He wasn't
Fe-
trying to gain an upper hand. He was trying
yeah,
to.
but also female logic tends to be a little different than male logic because
Mhm.
again, it's the perspective you bring it from. Female logic is about, well, if this could be the danger 20 years from now and I'm looking older and da 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 da, where men is like, object there, I need object, if I walk there I can get it, logical.
Yeah. All right. Well, and then it ends with kind of a tease of what's going on with Egwene because they talk about her plans and they're not supposed to even be that cryptic out loud.
Well, let me go back to one thing real quick because we talk about the side characters.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that I've picked up when we talk about the Aes Sedai hubris, the characters that actually get it the most are the ones that tend to be pushed as outliers by the
Mm,
ones who don't. Because Ramonda and Leland were talking horribly about Marilil, right? And in this chapter, we get a lot of moments where Marilil is actually understanding things better than all the other Aes Sedai.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's pause there for a second, and because we got 100 pages, we need to see how we can cram in here.
All right.
All right, so we've got about 100 pages here to go through. Chapter 21, 22, 23, and 24 is just all Rand's battle with the Seanchan. And
Yeah,
so,
and it seems like a lot, but it's very descriptive of the battle and
mhm,
everything. But what we're doing here is it's not the action scenes are actually faster to get through because it's what was
yeah,
special about the action scene.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I more want to talk about some of the personalities here, and then just a couple of the events kind of jump out to me. Um, if there are any we don't talk about, if there's a scene in here that you think is interesting, comment on it, and we'll talk about it. But there's just a couple of scenes that jump out to me, and the first one is when they're all waiting around there. Um, answering the summons. It's so Rand is summoning these disparate groups of people to him. Um, and one of them is he sends for some more Ashaman and he sends Narishma to go get um wow, I just Kalendor. Just completely brain farted there. Um, and there's a couple of interesting things happening here, I think, because the uh the summoning of all this different group of people, I think, goes hand in hand with his interaction with Narishma is a foreshadowing of what's about to happen, where he is angry and suspicious and dismissive of Narishma as Narishma is of him when he says, "You didn't tell me everything. I almost killed myself." And Rand just thinks he's not as good as he thinks he is, or he's making excuses, or he's going a little bit crazy because. But this is the second time we've been told the power is being weird. Because whoever it was, Moore or whichever one of them it was that went down to scout
Hmm.
the nuclear bomb, said that Sidon was worse there. It wasn't behaving right. Well, we get it again here with Narishma. He says basically the same thing, that it he was told precisely how the wards were and what weaves he needed to do to turn them off and retrieve the sword, and it didn't work. So either one of them's going crazy, or hey, wait a minute, here's another data point. But in much the same way that Rand is being over clever with his choice of it, as he tells Bashir later in the chapter, when Bashir says, "These are all the people that hate you and are scheming behind your back," and Rand says, "Yeah, who better to pay the butcher's bill?" So, well, except They're not the ones that are going to pay it. It's their men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good job, Stalin.
Well, exactly. So, okay, but
So this
there's
becomes
very
the
low.
Stalingrad
Yeah.
of the Wheel of Time right here.
So there's very little likelihood. I think a couple of them do get killed, but it's basically an accident because they stumble into something that they weren't expecting. It's their men are the ones going to be paying the price. These ones, especially the women, are all going to be around you, which, boy, that almost looks like it backfires later. So it's not just that he's being tyrannical. It's that his tyranny is causing him to become myopic, and it's causing him to not delegate and rely on others. Even Bashir, who he mostly trusts implicitly, he has trouble trusting him. And I mean, Bashir literally has to knock him over the head to get him to stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is a pattern we see in real life when we try to take bigger picture approaches to solving problems. The people who never get helped are the people in the bottom.
Hmm.
And the people who always get hurt by these bigger picture things. Okay, yeah, Putin's a tyrant, so we're going to help the Ukraine. So hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men have died. It's just the way it is. We're pushing our agenda, which is just and right, but lots of people are dying in the process. And it's not Putin or Zelensky or anybody on our side, especially the elites, that are getting hurt by this. The climate agenda. Who gets hurt? People in Syria now that don't get grain or food from the Netherlands because they're shut down because of emissions and fertilizer. You know, people in Africa who are now starving because they're not getting these big exports from these giant exporting countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one thinks about those people.
Yeah. And it which is a sharp departure because we have seen Rand caring too much. And even his continued, list of women that have died because of him, even that is becoming twisted and it's becoming hard instead of strong. Giggity. Um, that you can actually see him becoming more brittle. This is really it's not an accident that we had that scene with Cadsuan and uh
Really.
oh wow. Yeah. Cerelia just not that long ago because this is it. This is exactly what this is one of the payoffs of this book, which is why it doesn't feel like there's any payoffs because that's kind of the big payoff of the book is here we just got that kind of talking out loud about what we've been seeing for a couple of books now, and now we get the payoff here. This is the consequence, this giant mess that Rand makes because he's being hard instead of strong. Um, and I'm curious what you think about this. Part of the problem too is that because he is so arrogant and authoritarian, because he's not relying on the ability and experience of others, he fails to see that he actually accomplished something, but he turns it into a loss in his own mind because he's so hardened, he's making the perfect the enemy of the good.
Mm-hmm.
That he
Well, there's a lot of things going on here. This is a cross-cultural mind reading thing too.
mm,
We were talking about experiences with Egwene earlier. His only interaction with the Seanchan up until this point, other than a little romp in the snow with Avienda and then getting back, is Falm.
where he had the horn on his side.
Yeah, where he had the horn on his side, but also where he had their first push into invasion as
Yeah.
his only perspective on what they are. And he was so young and impressionable at the time that he failed to realize how honorable Turok was. because he was subject to the machinations of Suroth. And he's using that heuristic to say, you know what, this is the thing I have to throw my armies at.
Mhm.
When it actually probably wasn't at the time. Not only was it
Well,
probably not, but there could have been a diplomatic approach where we didn't get, of course, we don't get the memory of light with that diplomatic approach, but at the same time, it was probably something that if he had understood the culture, if he had understood the way their honor system works, just like with the Aiel, he took the time to learn that. But he never took the time to learn that the Seanchan, they're just invaders.
and he's kind of halfway there though, because and this is where he's too smart for his own good, in much the same way of him bringing all these people together to pay the butcher's bill. He does read the Seanchan right initially when he kind of investigates and studies and recons and learns about the Seanchan and how they act. So he anticipates their move correctly, that they're going to come in strength into this area. And so he anticipates the first move properly, but then because he's so rigid, he's so hard instead of strong, he has trouble adapting when they adapt. So kind of the first.
I just thought of a secondary point to this whole part of the books. It is there, no accidents, right? It's not an accident that Matt is not in this book at all, because you just said an important word that just popped it in my mind. He can't adapt. Matt is the adaptation person for him. He is the go with the flow guy. He is the general that can maneuver his armies no matter what's coming at him. And this is, I think, an exclamation point moment where it's Jordan saying, this is why Rand needs Matt.
Not just the adaptation, but then that friend to lean on, because Bashir, presumably Matt would have recognized things earlier because that's what he does. But Bashir recognizes it at the end when he tells them, when they initially fall on the large column marching forward and just uh you know uh get a good ambush in and really bloody them. And that's the scene where the Seanchan, I think he's a Death Watch guy, executes the commander because he stupidly pulled in all his scouts and was just pushing forward hard and fast. So then when that guy takes over, he reacts properly. And that's what Bashir tells him here at the end, in chapter 24, before it all climaxes there, that, look, you had a good plan in the beginning and it worked. We hit them hard. But now whoever's in charge down there knows what they're doing and has countered. And if we keep going, it's going to be a bloody mess and it's not going to be worth it. Bashir is telling him, hey, take the win, take the good. And Rand says, hell no, I want the perfect. And he pays, or his people, he doesn't. Well, he does it eventually at the end of the book. His people pay a very hard price for it.
Well, yeah, it's also kind of a testament to the battles he has fought, because you have to separate yourself from an individual battle versus a population level battle. And when he went after Samael, once Samael was defeated, the battle was over.
Yes.
But had he gone head to head with Samael's armies, and neither him and the Forsaken fought, and the armies came to a standstill, or one took advantage over the other, it's a different fight.
Well, and that was his entire plan. The pushing the armies at the border forts was always a feint for that reason. I mean, that's how much Rand has changed here, is that remember,
but there was no head of the snake he can jump to fight in the Seanchan army. But they are a machine.
I hadn't thought of this before, but to your point, that, and what I was saying earlier about how much Rand has changed, how much he's hardened just in one book. Remember, I pointed out one of my favorite scenes there at the end of A Crown of Swords is when the young Ashaman says, we can still save the army, because the snooty one, Taim's guy, says, what does it matter? And and the kid says we can still, and he's passionate about it, and Rand takes notice of that and he agrees with him. That was one of the reasons he planned it the way he did, was so that he could save more of his own army. And now just in a book, and you saw it right there at that last sentence of A Crown of Swords of him, you know, Rand al'Thor, king of the world, and he's thinking, yeah, that sounds good. And now this is the consequence of that. Um, the other scene that jumps out at me, and I don't remember exactly where it is, it's somewhere in the middle here, where they bring in a Domine that has been captured, and Rand wants to set her free, and she goes nuts.
Yeah,
This is
again, the
another,
cross-cultural mind reading.
and
If you're free, you should want to be free, right? Well, listen to Yeonmi Park talk about leaving North Korea.
yes,
And one of the things that made her want to go back wasn't the fact that she was being raped by Chinese sex slavers. It was when she was in South Korea and she had freedom and she had no idea what to do, and it was scary as hell.
yeah,
Yeah.
she, uh, it is another one of those instances where you can say should have known better, yes, but he couldn't,
Mm-hmm.
because in his, from his frame of reference, it
Yeah,
was
there's no reference point.
inconceivable.
Yeah.
It
Now
was just
this is somewhere
inconceivable.
where Egwene should have known better if she was there, because she was also exposed to other domain.
And she felt it within herself. That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things she says to Min is, I'm about to break. I would rather die. I want you to get out of here. I'm about to break. And she could feel it in herself that she was going to eventually and probably pretty soon become what she was seeing that was so horrifying her with the Domine who were truly broken. All right.
This the first time we get insight on the hierarchy that is developing in the Black Tower? The storm leaders, the attack
Yes,
leaders. Yeah.
you we saw it earlier. Um, back what I was referencing, the scene where where Time's guy comes to tell him that, comes to give him an update on the Black Tower, and the ones that have been staying with Rand come to tell him about what's going on the border forts, and there's a there's a clear friction there. There's a clear separation between those who have been staying with Rand and those who are Taim's guys coming from the tower. And this is codifying that of, not only are there factions, not only is there tension there, but now it's becoming ingrained in a hierarchy that Taim is claiming the tower as his. And it's again something that Rand fails to truly grasp and doesn't act on, even though he kind of sees it here when he's talking about the whole storm leader thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because before this book, you really only got the three levels. The what was it? The something, the soldier, then the Ashaman, or was it soldier
Soldier, dedicated, Ashaman.
dedicated Ashaman? Yeah.
Yeah.
But now they're actually branching off to specializations almost,
Mhm.
which is something that happens as you grow. It's like, oh well, we actually need this little bit more of order, to handle these different roles that we're playing. And then you look at, we see a lot with the Aes Sedai, their specializations. We haven't gotten a lot with the Ashaman, that some are better at certain things than others, which we get a lot of later, but not up until this point. And we're starting to get the fact that Taim is handpicking these people for these roles.
Um, the only other thought I had on this chunk of chapters here is I alluded to, I talked a little bit about the way it ended, and I really like Bashir all throughout these chapters, but then especially the way it ends, really showing you who Bashir is, and that it's his attitude, his almost swashbuckler um personality is is entirely real. That's who he is. It is not bravado. The way he just tackles Rand to put an end to it, tackles Rand and literally thumps him upside the head. he's exactly who Rand needs right now because he's pushed everyone away.
Hmm.
And this is one of the few people that is entirely real with him. Now it's still lacking in some of the things that Rand really needs, the things that he was getting from his friends, the things that he was getting from Moiraine and Lan. But I really like. I think Jordan is kind of telling you here at the end of these chapters that if not for Bashir, things would be so much worse.
Yeah, and not I brought up earlier that this was an exclamation point of why Rand needs Matt, but it's actually a more believable situation because if it was just Matt here, first of all, we wouldn't have 5 more books or however many more books, right?
Yeah.
But if it was just Matt here, it would be like a Twilight teen drama because it would have been like, oh, but you're my friend, I know you've got my back. Where Bashir, he's got that angst towards because he's the young man, Bashir's the elder, and Bashir has the same ideas, maybe not as good as Matt has become as we get going forward. But he's one of the great generals, right? And he's seasoned. He's lived a life. He has to take a role of semi uncle figure, whereas Matt would be just the friend that he listened to, and that.
Which he is because that's the role he plays with Tenobia.
Mm-hmm.
So he's used to playing that role, and she's a little bit crazy. So
Well, look
he's
at his
used to
daughter
playing.
too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. So any other thoughts on these
Well,
chapters
look at his
before we go to
mentors, the crazy guy that had him cut down the trees and bury
crazy
them.
general? Yeah. All right. So is it on to spoilers, or did you have any other thoughts on these chapters?
Yeah, because I think the reason that Condor, Calendor,
Kalendor.
Calendor does its thing is something that's a spoiler down the road too. Uh,
Yeah, partially, and the other part of it is just he's been told. That's a good point that he already has the clues before it starts, but by the time he gets to the end where he nukes everybody, including his own troops, he's already had several more that something's not right here. He's been
mhm.
told it, and then he's experienced it himself. Now, he's doing double duty there because he has something else going on as well, where he's getting the sickness when he tries to grab hold of the power.
Mhm.
But then even when he gets it, it's not working right. I mean, he experiences it himself.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go to spoilers. And actually, I want
Okay.
to bring the show into that comment you had. Did you want to start there or?
Well, let's just yeah. So definitely go away if this is your first read because there's some big spoilers here with yeah. So I think it's like triple bad there at the end because you have the baseline. The power is warped because of what they did with the Bowl of the Winds, doing way more than it was meant to do.
Yeah,
And then
and
and
without a male channeler there. I think that was the point.
yes,
There should have been a male channeler
that
there.
and as I recall, that was confirmed by Jordan in Q&As subsequently, is that the bowl, I believe the way he put it was in the Age of Legends, the bowl was designed as a regional thing. That was your regional weatherman. That oh, looks like we got a bad storm forming. Okay, let's get a little circle in here and knock down this front so it doesn't turn into tornadoes. That's what it was for, and they're
Mhm.
using it to change
Or
the
we're
weather
in
of
the
the whole
middle of a
world.
drought and we need some rain and da da da.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was designed as all the great things in the Age of Legends were. It was designed for both. So Jordan confirmed that it was a combination of they didn't have male channelers to guide Sidon, and they were using it for way more than it was intended
Which is
for.
an interesting point because we talk about order and chaos. I don't think it's accidental that he wrote in that when they're in a kind of a societal, a worldwide societal situation of complete order, that the hole in the bore is made,
Mm,
and they're controlling the weather. They're controlling everything around it. It's all about humans' control of everything.
mhm.
Even the Aiel and the Ogier are controlling the growth of plants and stuff. They think it's the nature magic and all of this, and it's wholesome, but it's all about external control of the planet. And it was a point in time when a little bit of chaos actually was needed because it was being eliminated from the
Yeah.
world. and that has its other repercussions. And so they were controlling the weather. Just another example of that. So I think that's the cycle of life is when there's too much control, chaos comes in.
Mhm.
And then when there's too much chaos, order starts to take over again, and we
Yeah.
just get this the snake eating its own tail, the symbol of the whole thing.
Yeah. The second point here, though, I think we might actually, that's not a big spoiler. We're either going to get to that right here at the very end or at the begin. No, I think it's here at the very end, isn't it? Where Cadsuan tells him, "I hope you haven't tried to use Kalendor because it's flawed."
Yeah, and that's the
I
thing.
think we get
And
that right.
the spoiler part of it was the flaw was it doesn't have the stopgap to keep you from overdrawing.
Which not only makes the power go a little crazy, it makes you go
Yeah.
crazy because you're also amplifying the taint.
Yeah, and so when you're drawing, you can overdraw the power, but then Angrail's strength is exactly linked to not letting you do it past the capacity of the thing you're using. Kalendor doesn't have that stop.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just keep drawing and drawing and drawing till you burn yourself out.
And I think that's another demonstration of Rand shattering from being too hard, because he he should be able to fully grasp what happened there, but because he's so hard, when he gets hit with that, because he's already been thinking for 8 books now, I am Kinslayer. I am the reincarnation of the man who killed his entire lineage. There is not a single genetic descendant of Lews Therin because he killed everyone who was related to him when he went mad. And I just did that. That I killed my people with those lightning strikes. He cannot see that the power ran wild because Kalendor is broken. The problem isn't you going crazy and killing everyone and being cursed. It's your ego and your arrogance pushed you to use something that was dangerous before you had really figured it out.
Which all of those things together bring me to one of my beefs with the show. Okay, so we've got the bowl of winds being used, throwing everything off. We've got Rand getting slashed with the dagger from Shadow Logoth, throwing him off. And that's one of the reasons he's getting sick, because we've got what I call the evil of human and the evil of the Dark One coming together inside of him when he's trying to use the power, and it's a conflicting thing. In the show, watch the scene, and since you haven't done the rewatch yet, it give you kind of something to look out for. Watch the scene when Moiraine takes the dagger from Matt and separates him from it. The taint in that is exactly the same as the taint that shows around Tame, or not, no, Logain. Logain in
Yes, in that second or third episode, whenever that is, where
so
that
they
prologue is
they
him.
made
Yeah.
the taint exactly the same, but one of the points of the books is the taint is actually conflicting.
Exactly. Yeah,
There are
that's a good
two
point.
different evils,
And
and he is now infected with two different evils.
and they very lazily made it the exact same graphic.
And the whole
Yeah.
cleansing, and this is the big spoiler, when the whole cleansing of the taint was him figuring out that the evil of Eredal and the evil of his stab from Ishi were fighting each other, and that was basically the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and he used them against each other to cleanse the taint.
I don't think that's actually why he's getting sick, though. I am mostly sure that Rand's sickness that starts here is because of the link that he created with Morden in Arid Hall.
But
I
we don't
think
see
that's
Morden
why
getting sick.
we we have some scenes where he sees that other face, and the other face looks pained too. I think Morden is feeling it somewhat, but he's probably better able to understand what's going on and thus work around it.
Well, the difference between him and Morden is the slash in the side, so I think it still has something to do with it.
That's true. That's true.
So, and I think Morden's pained face might be because of the link.
You know what? I think you're right. I think we may get that later when we get a short point of view from Morden. Is in a similar fashion to a Warder and Aes Sedai, he's feeling what Rand's feeling, and it's annoying because Rand's in constant pain.
Yeah, the conflicting wounds is what leads to him being able to cleanse the taint. And that's why I hate the way they did it, because the only thing different from the male and female source was the taint, and the taint is no different than Shadow Logoth's taint. So it's you've taken away a whole basically what how Rand fixes the world is cleansing the taint.
Yeah,
The dark one is actually semi-secondary to that.
That's a good point, because not only does he need the cleansing in order to be able to get to and win the last battle with himself and the Ashaman's sanity intact, but then that's going to matter going forward. That's going to impact the next age just as much as the dark one being contained.
I think that was my main spoiler.
I thought I had something else, but I don't remember what it was from the previous chapter. I don't remember, but
Elayne, Avienda, Nynaeve.
Yeah, but we're gonna get to more stuff with them anyway, because the next chapter is when the one of the twins gets murdered with the dark friend. And so there's a lot going on there. Did you have any other thoughts there on that previous chapter?
Nope.
Oh, I did have a comparison I wanted to make, and you hadn't heard of it before. So this happens twice actually. In Northern Virginia during the Civil War. So that area is a lot like where we grew up in South Texas, where you have these thickets, where you have these woods that have such a tangled web of brush and vine and nastiness that grows along under there. And that's where it becomes a big fire danger when we go to these long stretches with no rain and 106-degree temperatures.
Yeah, anytime I talk about going and helping my mom, that's what I'm clearing. Because if there's a wildfire in that part of Livonia, Texas, my mom is going to be the only house standing because I keep that land clear.
Exactly. Well, the area in Northern Virginia is like that, and so the battle in Chancellorsville, which is probably a name more people know, was in that stuff. It's one of the reasons the battle went the way it did, and the Confederacy was able to beat a much superior force in much this same fashion. That's why I think this was a big influence, because you can't see anything. That's part of Rand's problem. He initially uses that to his advantage of they can't see me, but then in the end, he's failing to take that into account of I can't see them either now, which is what Bashir is trying to tell him. So it's this really nasty battle because you can't see anything. And then it happens again a couple years later with Grant when he's invading Virginia. Not only can you not see anything, but because of that underbrush, in the Battle of the Wilderness a couple years later, it takes place in the summer when it's dry, and you're shooting out bits of powder, but also you pack wadding in there to get a tight seal for the gases to expand. Well, that wadding all comes out smoldering, and so it lights those dry leaves and that dry underbrush, and all these people who have been shot through the legs or through the lower abdomen, and they're not dead yet, but they can't move and they can't get away from these fires. And I think that was an influence, especially with the way it ends, with all these people just getting blasted with lightning, getting burnt with lightning. I think that's another one of these interesting historical influences for anyone who wants to go dig around on where some of these ideas that Jordan had came from. Go look at the Battle of the Wilderness, and there's a lot of similarity there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that ends this episode. We're going to do a little quick part 2, but it's going to be social. And it's going to be kind of Wednesday. A little bit of a continuation of what we did on Wednesday. So if you want to stick around for that, click on part 2, like, share, subscribe, do all those fun things. Do you think we can finish the book next time?
Yeah. We went through there pretty darn quick, and so there's a couple of big things.
The big battle was kind of the climax, and then now it's kind of closure. So it's going to be kind of probably resemble like the beginning of the book episodes, where there's a lot of things happening, but there's not a whole lot to say about any individual thing.
Yeah. So we should be getting through it pretty quick.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. And if you'd like to stick around for the social stuff, click on part 2, and we'll be back on Wednesday for the other.